Hey there, and welcome back to the Baseball Show. You're watching Nickel Press TV. I'm Amy Singleton. That's Uncle Ralph. You can find Mr. Lifshitz on Razzball, where he talks primarily about what we're going to talk about today, and that is prospects. We are both prospect hounds. We both love talking about the youngsters, although that might not sound appropriate, meaning in terms of baseball. So keep your heads on straight. We want to thank everybody for checking out our video series here. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Please like these videos, leave your comments. Let us know any players you would like to discuss that we haven't covered yet. You can go check out our player library playlist, which isolates each player we have discussed. We have them alphabetized, so you can just scroll through, pick out your favorite player or the guy you want to hear more about, and then you'll get a little brief 3, 4, 5, 6 minute analysis on said player. And with that being said, let's just dive right into the players that we have today. We're going to be talking about Brendan Rodgers, Josh Bell, and Dylan Cozens. So all three have a little bit different values, variations, excitability, projectability, etc., etc., etc. Brendan Rodgers, there isn't a whole lot to not like about Brendan Rodgers, and he's already a consensus top 10 prospect in the industry, and more likely a top 5 one. I mean, if you go around and look at all these lists that are starting to come out now, he's up there. And he's only had one full season under his belt. But that's what you get when you're the third overall pick in the draft. You play shortstop, and your future games are going to be at Coors Field. His sample size, as I mentioned, is still relatively small, but the results to this point have been overwhelmingly positive and exactly what you want to see in a high school bat in his first taste of the pros. His season was 110 games for Low A Asheville in the Sally League. He posted a 281 average with 19 homers and 73 RBIs. As I mentioned, he's 19 years old. It's off to a good start. All good stuff. I would, however, like to point out some flaws, some things you might be able to raise an eyebrow to, and some reason for pause. Let's consider the following things to not be in his benefit. He's still likely 2+ years away at best. He hasn't shown a ton of speed as far as steals go to this point. Asheville is a hitter's park, and Rodgers' home numbers were far ahead of his road splits. In fact, 13 of his 19 home runs came at home. This is not horrible, and for comparison, it's almost the identical stat line that Trevor Story put up in the same system, in the same league, in the same ballpark at the same age. The only difference is Story played in 12 more games. So if you like Story and what he's been doing so far as a pro, then there's room to think that Rodgers is in fact going to be as good, if not better. He shows incredible discipline at an early age. The strikeout rate isn't enormously high, 20%, and the walk rate at 11%. As I mentioned, everything, he's off to a great start. Ralph, I'm giving reasons for pause. I know you love Rodgers, but
Yeah, so let me hit you with some Rodgers love, because the concerns are valid. He doesn't have a lot of speed. I think one of the things when you compare and contrast him with Trevor Story, who's obviously was up and really hit the ground running last year, to say the least, when he finally got to Coors Field, finally got to Colorado. Story has a lot more speed than Rodgers does. Rodgers has a better hit tool. This is a guy that could hit 280 to 300 perennially throughout his career. That's the kind of player that he profiles as. Though the home ballpark is obviously very hitter friendly, it's a hitting haven. He was one of the youngest, if not the youngest player in full season ball last year. I think that sort of speaks volumes about his maturity, both as a player on and off the field. Across the board, though, I think that he's one of the more exciting prospects. Part of it is his future destination in Coors. If he moves over to second base, I think the power probably profiles well there. Depends, what happens with him and Story. Story's probably a little bit better of a defender, so I would expect him to stick at short and have Rodgers probably move over to second. But I also disagree with one other thing, that he's 2+ years away. I think that we could probably see Rodgers up in the big league sometime in 2018. DJ LeMahieu is out of contract, I believe, after this season. If it's 2 years, then LeMahieu probably gets traded. I think this is probably LeMahieu's replacement. They have him in the system, and he should see some at-bats with AA Hartford this year, if not a majority of them. Hopefully we can go there this year, and the ballpark will actually be open. You won't have to drive out like you did to see Lucas Giolito and then realize that you drove to Hartford when they weren't actually playing in Hartford. So it should be pretty interesting. I'm excited to go see Rodgers play. I think he's a top 10 prospect. When my top 100 drops a couple Wednesdays from now on the 22nd over on Razzball, Rodgers will be well within my top 10.
You did say he'll shtick to the position, right? Is that part of your shtick? Okay.
Shtick.
Just to clear up real quick, and I would love to meet you in Hartford to take in a Brendan Rodgers, at bat. But I didn't go to Hartford to see Giolito thinking or knowing that they weren't playing in Hartford. It was a home game on the schedule. However, you could have missed a tiny little asterisk that said technically designated a home game for Hartford, yet will be played on the road in Pennsylvania because Hartford Stadium is under renovation. I wish I had known that before the 2-hour drive that turned into an 8-hour drive because of construction on I-95, whatever. Another story for another day. Brendan Rodgers. This is how I like to look at Brendan Rodgers and Trevor Story, since we mentioned him. A family that has two brothers, and the oldest brother is technically the heir to the throne or the family fortune or business, whatever you have you. But the younger brother is like the better looking one, the more charismatic one, the one that everybody just thinks of all the time is like, that's daddy's boy. And it just becomes an awkward position for associates of the family, friends of the family itself, because the oldest one is technically the heir to the throne, but the youngest one is really who everybody knows is pegged to get it. That's kind of what happens with Story and Rodgers, where Rodgers is the one everybody is waiting for, everybody wants, but Story's been pretty good, and he's there now. So it's kind of an awkward little thing. A lot of shortstops start out as shortstops and then get moved off the position as their career progresses. If Rodgers is going to be moved to second base, I think you can expect his prospect status to jump even higher. And he's already in thin air, rare air, and I mean on prospect lists, not in course. As a shortstop, I think great, but it's a loaded position now. If you move him to second with a shortstop's bat, I don't know how you can get better as a prospect. You have a slim, if any, hope of getting him in Dynasty right now. That window is quickly closing. So if you're wondering about Rodgers, debating about Rodgers, thinking, is this somebody I should be giving up, these two decent prospects I have or whatever, yeah, don't hold back. Get the guy if you can. Moving on to a guy that, I don't know, Josh Bell. I don't know how do I want to phrase it because, as The Rock may say, finally, Josh Bell has come to Pittsburgh. Finally. He's arrived. He's like 24 now. He's been known about as an outfield prospect for having a great hit tool, a great bat in the Pirates system. They moved him to first base just to get him up to Pittsburgh, to get him in the lineup because their outfield is so crowded. I mean, you may be torn on this guy. Is he good? Is he bad? Should I want him? And then, just in the last week or so, the news is broke that he had surgery to remove a loose body from his knee. I mean, it all sounds like reasons to avoid him, right? No, wrong. The timetable on that recovery is 2 to 4 weeks, not something I'm necessarily concerned about. If you want to question, is he a power hitter? No, he's not. But he's big enough, he's a large dude, to think that he's got 20-plus home runs in his bat. Is he a first baseman? No, he's not. But he's going to give you first base eligibility in fantasy. So unless you're a starting pitcher for Pittsburgh, you shouldn't necessarily be worried about him playing first base. You should be happy you can plug him in there in your fantasy lineups. As I mentioned, the Pirates have moved him there because they want his bat in the lineup. So if all these sound like negative things to you, what makes him so special? It's his plate discipline. The guy walks nearly more times than he strikes out. I mean, he's got insanely low K rate numbers throughout his career. He's got outrageously high walk rate numbers, and they're all legit. He's a career 300 hitter, over 1,800 minor league at-bats, and he's only gotten better with each level he's risen in the system. If you're wondering if this guy's in redraft, if he's already tasted the pros, why are we talking about him on a prospect show? It's because he still has prospect eligibility, and he might be stashed in some people's minor systems because he still has that eligibility to him. I know I'm one of the high guys on Bell. I just traded for him in the Raz 30. That is a 30-team league that Ralph is the commissioner of, that I am the new best owner of or in. I'm probably one of the higher guys in the industry on Bell. But Ralph, tell me why I'm wrong for being that high.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're necessarily wrong, but I think that a lot of people, over the last few years, because he's been a guy that's kind of been on dynasty managers, people that pay attention to prospects' tongues for at least a few years. Initially, I think he was, a first round talent that ended up dropping a few rounds because he had a strong commitment to Texas. Pittsburgh stepped up, gave him a huge multi-million-dollar signing bonus, and he decided to go pro. So he's been in the minors for a few years, kind of honing his craft. In terms of hit tool, this guy has an elite hit tool. This is a 300 hitter. This is a guy that's going to have high on base percentages. But I think a lot of people look at the fact that he's 6'1", 240, actually lost 20 pounds in the offseason before he had the surgery doing yoga. So he's actually about 6'1", 220. So I don't know if the yoga had a negative effect on the knee and that's what happened. But he's trying to get more limber. But I don't think he's a player that necessarily is going to touch 20. I think long term he's probably, a mid-homer guy. Reminds me a lot of James Loney with these hit tool guys. I always think that's a lazy comp, but I think that it's appropriate with him. It's his bat to ball skills are ridiculous. He doesn't hit a whole lot of fly balls, which I think is part of the problem with the homers, even in the homer happy major leagues, whether you believe those balls are juiced or not. He's only a 24% fly ball hitter. He's a 48.81% ground ball hitter. A lot of those are hard ground balls. Makes a lot of hard contact. So he's a guy that I think, right from the jump is somebody that's going to hit 300. He'll certainly help you out, with batting average. Probably will drive in a fair amount of runs because of his control of the barrel of the bat. He's going to be able to move the ball to all fields, really hit the ball where the defense isn't. He's one of those classic kind of players. I do think that he has the elite hitting skills that potentially over the next few years as he hits his power prime could make adjustments, add a little bit more loft to his swing, and potentially could be that 20 hitter that a lot of people have projected him for when he was originally drafted. But I think the baseline tools are very good. I don't love him. He's probably going to be somewhere in the top, 30 to 40 range in my top 100. But I do think that he has a lot of redraft value. If he's somebody that you can grab at the end of drafts, he's your bench bat, or somebody you can use, in rotation in your corner infield spot if you play in those sort of roto leagues with corner infield spots, or even a utility guy. I think that Bell is a good value because I think that the floor is so high in comparison to a lot of young players coming up. I don't think he's going to struggle with major league pitching.
Yeah, you say you don't think he'll touch 20, which means you think he'll touch teens, and that would be inappropriate, and we run a clean adult program here. So I do think he can be above 20 home runs. Some of the comps to him have been James Loney, and I think it depends on which James Loney you're thinking of, because James Loney at one point in his prime was a solid first baseman, top half of the league first baseman. And I think Bell has that potential. And again, he's still young enough to think that he could develop the power. So if you're looking at a guy that's going to be top 20, top 15 first baseman based on average, based on, basically just all your counting stats other than power, I think it's a good baseline and a good floor. The standard for first baseman these days is 25 or more home runs. But even if he doesn't get there, the high average and the other stats he could give you could kind of offset that. And again, I still think he's going to get there. Maybe not be, it might not be this year, but I think he does. Like I said, this is more of a redraft guy than a dynasty guy, even though he does have his minors eligibility. A lot of people seem to be passing on him. I'm telling you, I don't think you should be making that mistake. I like him for this year, day one, starting now. So let's move on to another guy in a Pennsylvania organization. Another big guy, little different type of player. He is an outfielder, as was Josh Bell at the start of his career. A little bit bigger. He's 6'6". He's a monster. He's gargantuan. I'm talking about Dylan Cozens. He's begging for someone to put some respect on his name. And after his 2016 season, I don't understand how you could not. He's flying under the rankings radar. I mean, literally no one is talking about him. Yet he just put up a 40 home run, 20 stolen base season in Double-A. I mean, how can you not put some respect on that? The problem, he played for Reading of the Eastern League, the Fighting Phils of the Eastern League, which is primarily a pitcher-friendly league, with Reading being the outlier. It's true. Most, if not all, of his damage came in home games. I mean, he batted .295 with 29 homers and 83 RBIs in just 68 games. 29 out of his 40 home runs came at home. That's kind of absurd. That's kind of, video game like. It's more MLB The Show than MLB The Reality. But before that, he hadn't shown much power. He did, have 16 home runs in Low A Lakewood, which, by the way, is not a power-friendly park. So that kind of shows maybe there is some upside there. I get it. He had one greatly inflated season. Move along. But at 6'6", as I mentioned, the guy's gargantuan. So to think that he does possess that kind of power is something that you could buy into. He's also stolen 20 or more bases for 3 straight seasons now. So the speed, you can't really, you can't fluke speed. There's not better speed parks as opposed to lower speed parks. His average has been all over the place, but currently sits at 267 for his career. I'm not really sure if he's the high average guy, low average guy, but 265 with 20 more homers and 20 more stolen bases, that's a player that you should be wanting to target in Dynasty, and nobody seems to be on the Cozens train at this point. Sometimes players need to see the success they can have in order to believe the success they are capable of. Maybe this could be true for Cozens. Maybe he needed to have the season to now really launch and elevate his career. I'm not saying I'm the high guy in Cozens, but I'm not the low guy either. He's somebody I'm intrigued with. I think you can get him for the cheap. And he's somebody, if I can get him cheap enough, I want him on my roster because I'd rather be sitting there if he does break out than not having gotten in when I could have.
Yeah, and I think that, Cozens is definitely a polarizing prospect. You look at the raw athleticism. This kid was a D1 football prospect coming out of high school when the Phillies drafted him. He chose baseball. He's 6'6", just a massive man. Had the 40 homers, and he was somebody that was on my radar coming into this season. I never expected to see him touch 40. Led all the minor leagues in homers. Reading obviously is probably the best hitting environment in all the minor leagues. The top 2 home run hitters in the minors, him and Rhys Hoskins, led all of the minor leagues in homers. There are some things with Cozens' profile that give me pause. I don't think that he's the 270 plus hitter that he was this season. I don't think he's a 40 home run hitter. I do think he has speed. I think he's got 20/20 upside, but I think he's somebody who's going to struggle with a batting average. If you look at what he's done in winter ball, he's really struggled. He's hit a lot of homers. He might even lead. I think it's the Puerto Rican League in homers. If he's not number 1, he's in the top 5. Has some off the field issues. Got into a fist fight with Bo Powell, one of his teammates down at winter ball. I guess they were kind of razzing him about not being able to hit off-speed pitches. Guy got pissed. I mean, if you mess with a 6'6" guy, if you mess with a bull, you're going to get the horns, the train and the track, all those sort of expressions. It's one of those sort of things. But there are some questions in terms of, how Reading aided his power was. As you said, most of his homers did come in Reading. His home run to fly ball ratio was 33.8%. That is ungodly for a full season. Gary Sanchez, who had a 40% home run to fly ball ratio in his truncated major league season this year, that's not sustainable. But I think Sanchez is obviously, in my opinion, a better player than Cozens is. So I have a lot of questions as to what he's going to do. It should be interesting to see what Cozens does next year at Lehigh Valley. I also think it's interesting that both he and Hoskins didn't get called up to Lehigh Valley at any point during the season with the kind of numbers they were putting up. I imagine the Phillies wanted to sort of pad their numbers, make them look a little bit better, maybe as potential trade targets. They do have a lot of outfielders and first basemen in that system right now. It'll be interesting what happens this year with Cozens. As I've said before, I've covered him a lot over the last season as he was probably the top breakout prospect in 2016. He's a guy that if you own him, I wouldn't be trading him. I'd be waiting and seeing what happens. And if he's somebody that you don't own, I'd probably wait and see what happens before trading for him. Unless the price tag is really low. He's not showing up in a lot of top 100 lists. Surprisingly, when you think about the production, one would think that he would at least sneak into the back end of a lot of those, if not a little bit higher, maybe 50 to 40. Just based on the production, the type of numbers that he's putting up. Like I said, he's not a 40 home run hitter, but I think if we're looking at a 230, 240 hitter in the major league level with 20 homers and 20 steals, that's a very useful player.
You said you didn't think he'd touch 40, but he did touch 40. So does that mean he loves Cougars? I'm confused.
Probably.
I know you're a Red Sox guy, but before we move on, can we just make an agreement to not bash Gary Sanchez any more than you've already done to this point?
I'm not bashing them. I'm
series.
just putting the numbers out there so the people know. We got to give the people the information.
The Kraken is a god. But going back to the Phils, going back to comparable players, I think, you had mentioned Darren Roof at one point as having similar kind of stat line to what Cozens has put up to this point and what has Roof done as a pro. I agree. I hear you. The big difference, though, is the speed. We agree the speed is real. Roof didn't necessarily have that. And, we keep talking about Reading being such a hitter's park and maybe inflated, maybe even doubled his home run total. So let's say he's got 20 home run power and, you just put a 2 times that because it was Reading. Fine. He said he's top 5 in home runs in the Puerto Rican League. I don't know that the Puerto Rican League is a hitter's haven. So he's doing it in other places. As far as, getting into off-field, transgressions with teammates, listen, the guy is a monster. He's 6'6". You don't pick on a guy like that. You don't make fun of a guy like that because you're going to get knocked out, as maybe is the case in what happened. So that's a lesson for life, But anyway, I agree with you. If you have Cozens, you're loving it and hold tight on him, unless somebody's willing to give you a fortune because they just happen to be, a big Phillies fan or a big fan of 6'6" guys who like Cougars. But if I disagree with you in this aspect, again, if you can get him for fair value, like a 1-for-1, mid-level prospect swap on somebody that's just like, let me get out of this guy while I can still get something before he becomes down roof, then take advantage of it. Yes. If somebody's asking for Brendan Rodgers or something, no, they're not on the same level at all. So that's where the weight kind of comes in. Hey, listen, we're going to wrap things up. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you have any more detailed questions about any of these players or any other players for that matter, hit up Ralph or myself on Twitter. Leave your question in the comment section below. We'll be sure to answer it. We want to thank everybody that's found us through Reddit, everybody that's found us through Razzball, and all the people that have just organically found us on your own. If this is your first time and you're not, or maybe you've been here before, if you're not subscribed to this channel, please take a second and do that right now. It means a lot to us. It shows that we're doing the right thing and we're trending in the right direction. As well as please make sure to like the video and, like I said, leave your comments. You can find us on any social media platform you are on: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're there. Just look for Nickel Press TV. And I think that's going to do it. For Ralph, I'm Andy, and this has been another episode of The Baseball Show. Oh, last thing, real quick. If you're unfamiliar with the player library, go check that out right now. We take everybody we've covered, we break it up and isolate them on their own, put them in alphabetical order, so you can scroll through and navigate, find the player of your choosing, and you don't have to listen to all the other stuff about players you're not interested in. That's simple. We'll see you next time. This has been The Baseball Show. Thanks.